And now we're happy to address any questions you have about predictive analytics or organizational analytics. You can think of this as the free consulting segment of our webinar. It's open access to the modeling agency's advanced analytic gurus, senior consultants Keith McCormick and Scott Terry. Let me see if Scott is back. Not as of yet. He expects to be. We're going to stand by, and hopefully Scott will be back with us. But for now, Keith and I will certainly entertain the questions that are rolling in now. And I'll be pleased to read them aloud for myself, Scott, Keith, to respond. So let's look at the first here. Here's a question from Tom. This relates back to, I believe, Scott's segment, and we'll go ahead and entertain it now. If Scott returns, certainly he'll have a more specific response, because Keith, he asked, what tools are you using to clean the data, create statistic models, and visualize the data you showed for the box plots? I'll hedge that a little bit to say that, let's make sure that we focus more on the approach and how we want to clean the data than the particular tool. So I'm not sure that either of us know the specific tool that Scott used. If he returns, we'll ask him. But Keith, in general, are there certain tools that you find outside of perhaps a predictive analytics tool, and some of them include, a lot of capability for cleaning the data and bridging the data and preparing it for analytic modeling. But we are vendor neutral. But what can you tell Tom around tools?
Let me start perhaps in this way, Eric. I think the reason that it's difficult for us to know for sure what tool that Scott used in that particular demo is that, you use multiple tools, as you know, but also because a box plot you're going to be able to find pretty much everywhere. So you'd be able to do a box plot in R, you'd be able to do a box plot in SPSS or SAS, pretty much anything. So the quick comment on the box plot is that, of course, some people find box plot a little bit old school in that it was originally proposed in Tukey's exploratory data analysis in the late 70s. But I would urge you to kind of embrace box plot because it's really pretty cool. Now, what you generally don't do, because it has a look and feel that's a little bit different, let's say, than like a Tableau or something, right? I mean, I bet Tableau lets you do box plots, actually. But because of that, I usually don't put box plot in a report, but it's so useful during the exploratory portion of the data when you're concerned about things like outliers, because there's very few data visualizations that you can do that as rapidly give you a sense of central tendency and outliers and so on. So if you're doing linear regression type problems, which, as you noticed, Scott showed a lot of scatter plots and the like. If you're doing those kinds of problems, I'd really urge you to do things like box plots because they're really fantastic, and you'll be able to find them everywhere. Again, open source tools will, KNIME, for instance, also has it. So that's just four right off the top of my head. SAS, SPSS, KNIME, and R would all be ways of doing box plots.
Yeah, that's true. And you're right. That's not specific enough that one particular package would have it. And a great way to address the question without endorsing or disparaging any packages, as we, are always careful to do. Amit asks three questions. They're a little bit related. Let me go through all three, and then you can tie them together as you wish, Keith. First question is, what are the good and bad features of model deployment as a web service? And I think that relates to his next question, which is IoT data purely mathematical driven data, and how would a neural network perform to predict with such data? And the last one, what are the best algorithms for time series analysis of data? Feel free to pull from that what you want. If there's any part of that you'd like me to repeat, just let me know.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a potluck buffet. As you know, Eric, I'm calling in from a conference in Vegas this week, and that does kind of make me think of the buffet line, which is so common out here in Vegas. But excellent questions, of course. So I think what I'll do is I'll opt to do a quick answer of each, and hopefully, Amit, that's there. So deployment as a web service. Well, I think I wouldn't rule out pretty much any kind of deployment. So increasingly, I think, we were mentioning big data and where it is in the hype cycle earlier. Big data is affecting storage at the moment more than it's affecting modeling, I think. That's kind of my own opinion. But as we get uh, increasing access to all kinds of different technologies, I think that deploying into things like a Salesforce.com, or deploying in the cloud, or deploying with even into dashboards and things, I'm a fan of all of those things. But what I would urge you to do is not wait until deployment to bring that up. And I mentioned this earlier in my comments. You've really got to involve the people that are impacted. And if you're going to do web deployment, then that means you've got integrators that are involved as well. And I don't know about you, but I have not met a lot of statisticians or data miners that were also systems integrators, right? So for instance, I was on a gig with a cell phone company, and I helped develop a model that they incorporated into a phone app. Well, I'm a busy guy. I do my thing, but I'm not going to suddenly learn cell phone, I'm not going to learn smartphone operating systems as additional professional development at this point in my career. So realize that this becomes a team-based thing. If you're going to do web-based stuff, you just have to make sure that you get everybody in the room and everybody talks it out. So I'd be all for it, but just make sure that you've got the right people in the room. As far as Internet of Things, could you remind me of the question, Eric, because I'm not sure that I have anything off the top of my head on this one.
Yeah, so Amit asks, is IoT data purely mathematical driven data, and how would a neural network perform to predict with such data?
Well, you get into streaming. So one thing to think about is it's going to be a little bit more complex than your typical project right off the bat. Now, the main thing with Internet of Things data is that you're almost certainly going to have to aggregate it. So you're going to have to spend a lot of time exploring the data, thinking about, is one row in the model a minute of IoT data, or is it a day of IoT data, or is it an hour of IoT data? You see, that's going to be something you're really going to have to think about. And if it's something like every time a vehicle drives past a sensor, the sensor triggers, then is it an event, or is it a roll-up of all the events over a time slice? You've got all kinds of complications like that you want to think about. So once again, you want to make sure that your model building and therefore your data prep is aligned with your ultimate use at deployment. Okay? And then, the last one was time series. Which algorithms? Gosh, this is, of course, a really big topic. But what you probably want to do for professional development's sake is do a little bit of reading and thinking around ARIMA. That's A-R-I-M-A. It's a crazy acronym. It's Auto-Regressive Integrated Moving Average, but anyway, ARIMA. Do a little reading around that, because that's kind of the grandfather of all that. Came out in the 70s, and that would be, at least one primary choice that you would have available to you. But then people also will do things like using neural nets to do things like time series. But if you do that, there's a lot that you have to learn about how to set up the data and to do time lags to do that. So if you dove into the neural net end of the pool to do time series at first, you might find yourself a little bit frustrated. So I would start with the basics and do a little bit of reading on ARIMA. Usually that's something that economists or econometricians specifically have to learn a lot about in university settings. I know that's a little bit of a long answer, but I wanted to give you a quick answer on each of the three.
Sure, and I think it's very helpful. We haven't lost any. This is the time of the event where people have to start moving on to the next thing. We haven't lost anybody, but that was great advice. And I know Amit, he said, interesting, thank you for your answer. And Rima, I think, was pretty common. There's a bad case of it going around our school. One kid even caught a bad case of leptokurtosis. So, yeah. Moving on to the next question quickly.
You could do a poll, Eric, and see how many folks can correctly identify leptokurtosis as opposed to plaque-kurtosis. And of course we're not making up these terms, everybody. We are being lighthearted about it, but they're real words.
Right. Humor at our own expense, right? So Sam, our friend Sam from the model development class last week, asks a question a little bit more vertical market. And matter of fact, it prompts me to put up one final poll here as we go into our last question. Sam asks, can you elaborate a bit on using predictive analytics in inventory and retail forecasting, more about the modeling aspect? And while you answer, let's take a look of those who remain with us, which is still more than half. well more than half actually. So I think we've done good on retention, and we're flattered by that. Let me go ahead and launch a poll while you respond and just see what markets are with us here today. Primarily, I'll go ahead and toss that up after you complete your answer. So can you elaborate on predictive analytics and inventory and retail forecasting, mainly the modeling aspect?
Sure, sure. Well, Sam, thanks for the question. Trying to think, I know exactly what I want to describe, and I'm trying to kind of find the words here. The way historically that we've done kind of inventory forecasting would be ARIMA, that acronym that I mentioned earlier. And then the way that it's usually done is you take a whole product line, or maybe even, a whole product family, and you do this big, massive top-down forecast. And then most business intelligence tools, I'm thinking of one tool in particular, has a feature called spreading. And then what happens, Sam, is that this big overarching forecast gets spread, again is the term, down in a top-down fashion, down to the individual SKUs. So the notion would be if SKU 1235C is normally 2% of the revenue for the product line, it gets 2% of the forecast, if that makes sense. I know that's a little bit abstract without a visualization. Well, now with computers being powerful and you get obviously larger, more complex data sets than we had access to 10 years ago. What you can do is you can do it bottom up. You can actually do a SKU level. Now, of course, I'm saying SKU, everybody, not SKU like non-normal distribution. So you take all the different product SKUs, and you might have 180,000 of them. Well, a human forecaster can't do 180,000 forecasts, but a computer can. So you do your 180,000 forecasts, and rather than doing it top down, you do it bottom up, and then you roll up those forecasts. So I've seen that kind of thing done a number of times. It is probably more logistically challenging than a modeling challenge, because the models tend to be fairly default, off-the-shelf type models, because you're doing 180,000 of them, so you really can't customize them. But that kind of thing can be powerful. So hope that was helpful, Sam. That's best I could do in a couple of minutes, because it's a big topic, but an interesting one.
Big topic and fully impromptu, but that never stops you from a fantastic response. And of course, we kicked the door open for a little humor here. So Naeem chimed in with a question. Using predictive analytics, would you have been able to predict the churn rate at this point of the seminar? I would say, are we able to? Yes. Would we actually do it? No, for the same reason that the shoemaker's kids go barefoot. We should apply analytics in our own company, right? We're a little small, but we're always doing it for others, and particularly large organizations. But I do appreciate the question and love the return humor. That's always fantastic. And we put up here the poll results to see that, no wonder why in the earlier poll when we asked about net lift modeling that there was a pretty good response to that. That's because the majority of those who are with us today are in marketing or CRM analytics and behavioral modeling, which isn't necessarily fully exclusive to retail and consumer brands. These are checkboxes. I think they could make more than one selection. So that helps us to see who was with us today across the board here. So I'll go ahead and hide those out. But at 31 minutes past the hour, we'd better draw this event to a close. I'd certainly like to thank our attendees today for your sustained interest and your active participation, as well as Scott and Keith for their great presentation segments and the highly informative Q&A contribution, Keith, and thanks for holding up with the two of us with Scott out. We'll hope to, actually, we plan to follow up with an email shortly with some resources and suggestions that will hopefully be useful to you, and from there, we'll hope that you'll consider joining us at a public classroom or live online training event soon. So make sure to go to the website and check out the schedule and details for next month's classroom training in Dubai, as well as our most popular venue in Washington, D.C. coming up in April, followed by our live online classroom experience that comes up in May. Now, if you don't have a training budget or your schedule just doesn't fit, but you'd like the guidance of a seasoned mentor, you might be interested in the modeling agency's Escort on Call program. Escort on Call is essentially a retainer account that provides remote open access to a TMA senior consultant, essentially an analytic lead. Simply open up an Escort on Call account and you've instantly added a wealth of experience and capability to your existing bench without expanding payroll, administrating complicated contracts, or taking elevated risk on larger commitments. We'll get you the answers you want, guide you through it tactically or strategically, show you how it's done, implement any analytic tasks you may wish to delegate, and then remain on call until the next time you need us. And meanwhile, when we're not actively working, you're not paying a dime. So a link to the Escort on Call description page will be among the resources included in the follow-up email. On behalf of myself, Scott, and Keith, have a very pleasant afternoon and evening, and this concludes our webinar for Predictive Analytics Failure to Launch.